and welcome to Matenaer On Air. Thank you so very much for joining us. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, the Calvinator, coming to you live from our studio in beautiful downtown Waukesha. You can always join us, call or text at 844-967-2789, 844-96.
Pasty.
No, it's not pasty.
It is pasty.
Is it pasty?
Pasty.
It can be pasty.
Yeah.
I like that. Pasty.
Who went on a website and did a little research?
Pasty or party.
It's pasty or party. That's it.
That'll work. And you can leave a comment on the live stream if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and or Twitter. Have a very, very busy show coming up today. If you are my age, I'm 64, or you have parents who are in their 60s and 70s, I highly encourage you to stick around. Joe McClear from McClear Law Offices is going to be joining us at 10:30 this morning, and he helps people plan for the future, and especially in this day and age where assisted living is extraordinarily expensive, depending upon the kind of care you need as you get older. It's something that we should all be talking about and planning for now.
Correct.
So if you're going to have questions, we're going to encourage you to call Joe. Joe McClear going to be here from 10:30 until 11 o'clock today to answer your questions and talk about some of the concerns, because certainly this is something that's going to be facing all of us at some point.
Not me. I will never die, and I will always be healthy.
Oh, good for you.
Pew-pew.
Yeah, good for you. And then coming up at 11:06, very excited to have her joining us in studio. Marilla Copier from Vogelzang Law will be here, and we're going to talk specifically about the cancer mesothelioma. Mesothelioma.
Yep.
And this is particularly specific, I want to say, to people who work in the trades, and it has to do with being exposed to asbestos over the years.
Yes.
So Marilla will be joining us live in studio coming up at 11:06, so I hope you can stick around for that. To kick things off, though, I don't remember if this dropped on Friday or Thursday, because it hasn't gained a whole lot of traction in the national news yet.
Not really.
Not yet.
Yeah.
NBC News did have a piece, and that's where I pulled this from. But the Department of Defense's Inspector General in 2018 began an investigation that was spurred by complaints which alleged a senior military medical officer in the White House Medical Clinic had engaged in improper medical practices, including on-site visits. They zeroed in on a 3-year period during the Trump administration, and they also did employee interviews going all the way back to 2009. But this was Dr. Feelgood Central, man. It's amazing if you read this report.
Yeah. They found I don't know what the medical term is, and I can't say what I want to say on the air, a buttload of drugs. Like, just, everywhere.
Again, according to this report, which was released this month, it came out earlier in January, the White House Medical Unit dispensed prescription medications, including controlled substances, to White House staff who were ineligible.
Yep.
This also included Schedule II drugs like fentanyl, hydrocodone, morphine, oxycodone. In the same inventory housing records for other medications, even though federal regulations require those to be kept separate. The records from the Trump administration were handwritten.
Oh, my God.
Handwritten. And again, we'll put a link to this report in the show notes after the show is over, so you can take a look at it yourself. This isn't fiction. This is a report from the DOD's Inspector General's office. Again, according to the report, the Trump administration frequently contained errors in the medication counts. The text was not legible, or they just crossed out texts that were not properly annotated. And I think another one of the big concerns about this is that the White House Medical Office spent tens of thousands of dollars during the Trump administration on name brand meds instead of generics.
Yeah.
So they spent $46,500 on Ambien, which is a sleep medication. That's 174 times more expensive than the generic. 174 times.
Well, I mean, if I'm going to take a sleeping pills, I got to do the best. I got to take the best. And I want to have the most ridiculous dreams that Ambien can only provide.
The clinic also spent about $100,000 during the same time period on Provigil, which is a stimulant that is 55 times more expensive than the generic equivalent.
I mean,
this is bad.
This is every time when I saw this, I just kept thinking about all the times the various Washington elite sitting in the halls of Congress, shaking their fists about all of the problems regarding the opiate crisis and everything.
And there is.
And there is.
There is.
And we need to do something about it. But they're just walking around willy-nilly, basically breaking the law, getting the drugs and spending a lot of money to do it.
Our money.
Oh, yes.
Taxpayer money.
That's true. Listeners, guess what? You bought a ton of Ambien for White House staff, and you got nothing in return.
844-967-2789, 844-967-2789, or leave a comment on the live stream if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, or Twitter. Stephen from Green Bay joining us this morning. Good morning, Stephen. What did you want to say about this?
So I have a proposition for you guys.
Okay.
Since it was the taxpayers that bought all that Ambien, maybe they should disperse it to the taxpayers that actually paid for it. Because, I could use some good sleep.
Same.
With that being said, government these days, unfortunately, is a lot of distraction tactics. And then you find out later on down the road that there's funny business going on behind the scenes. And it almost seems like in politics, when things seem to be going good and there's not a lot of news to talk about, which hasn't happened lately, but and things seem to be going on the up and up, you find out, later on down the road that there was funny business going on behind the scenes. I just think it's unfortunate. We need to obviously clean house in the White House and, replace it with people that are going to have bigger agendas than divide and conquer and fear and subscribe to, all of this, baloney that they are.
Stephen, when you say the White House, do you mean Congress or or just the whole thing, all of D.C.? Because this is coming out of this is from the previous administration.
Well, I'm speaking mostly about the Republican parts of Congress.
Yeah.
Because what you're actually suggesting, Stephen, what you're suggesting sounds to me like Project 2025, where Donald Trump and the Republicans have essentially said that if he gets reelected, he is going to fundamentally change democracy by firing or changing the status of a lot of these federal employees who are nonpartisan.
Yeah.
And who have lots of institutional knowledge, and they've all been there a really long time. So,
and probably don't need fentanyl.
Well, but again, it's my understanding that the goal is to install loyalists who will only do what Donald Trump wants. Thank you for calling, Stephen. Always appreciate you listening and always appreciate you checking in. You can join us as well at 844-967-2789, 844-96.
Party. You don't know what I'm going to say now.
So exciting. We're talking about this report that came out. It was earlier this month and just hasn't gotten a whole lot of attention. And I certainly think it deserves a little bit more light. From the Department of Defense, the Inspector General opened an investigation into the White House Clinic, which apparently now the White House Clinic, there are several locations around Washington, D.C., but it is only supposed to be for certain people.
Well, the title of the report is just so sexy. It's evaluation of the DoD internal controls related to patient eligibility and pharmaceutical management within the National Capital Region Executive Medicine Services.
It's a much better read than that title implies.
I think we should put a half-naked man on there taking an Ambien while a lady just
leans back
in a faint motion. Then it'll just fly off the shelves.
This report came out that they were giving out pills left and right, even to staff that were not eligible. And among the drugs, fentanyl, hydrocodone, morphine,
Oxycodone. These are all drugs that in the hands of addicts will kill them. And we've been talking about a very real, very, very real opioid crisis in this country. And they're literally just handing them out like candy.
And if you look at some of the numbers, 200, 400, 300 pills.
Yeah.
To, again, staff members who were not necessarily eligible for that. And then the record keeping was so bad and handwritten that it's tough to go back and find out who these people were that were getting all these free pills. The report also detailed the giving of meds to ineligible White House staff. That also meant some staffers got free specialty care and surgery at military medical treatment facilities. Yeah.
I don't call the doctor because sometimes I'm afraid that just a checkup's going to put me like 3 months behind on payments. And these guys are getting special free care on our dime.
On our dime.
That is. Ugh. Now I will ask this question because I'm always interested in all's fair, if you will.
Okay.
This seems rampant and a problem. Is this something that happens in every administration? You know what I mean? Like, I mean, maybe there are drugs being passed out in the Biden, maybe Obama, maybe Bush. Maybe, I have no idea. Like this. Before this,
what was going on?
I've never heard anyone talking about this.
No, that's a good point.
So is it a poorly kept secret that we're just finding about now, and then someone will come out with a report saying, "Well, yeah, in the Clinton administration, we got." Let me tell you.
Well, and that's a fair point.
Yeah.
I would be very interested to learn more about that. You can always join us if you want to call or text 844-967-2789, 844-967-2789. Stay close. You're listening to Matenaer On Air, coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network. Welcome to Matenaer On Air. So very glad to have you join us. 844-967-2789, 844-967-2789 if you would like to call and or text. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, Cool Cal B on the board, coming to you live from downtown Waukesha. You can also leave a comment on the live stream if you like, if you're watching on Facebook, YouTube, and or Twitter.
And we read all of the live stream comments.
We do.
No matter how silly they are.
Absolutely.
We did get a text from our buddy Andrew in Maine who did say, one, before we blame everything on Trump, is the staff of the Executive Medical Services hand-selected by POTUS? That's a good question.
I don't believe so.
I would say, though, probably Executive Medical Services. Well, yeah, that's a good question.
It is a good question.
Then point two, this could not have been a military doctor as they only know how to administer Motrin, water, and dry socks for everything. Headache, Motrin, and drink water. Broken arm, Motrin, and drink. I see what you're doing there. Cancer, change your socks and drink water. Oh, there's 2B. There's an addendum. Military satire for those not in the know. Veterans know. So,
all right. Well, we appreciate that, Andrew. I don't believe that these people are hand-selected by the president. Again, I don't know that for sure. We'll see what we can find out when we go to break. But it's a pretty interesting report that we will put in our show notes if you want to look at it. Essentially, they were handing out fentanyl and oxycodone and Ambien like it was candy.
And the expensive versions, not even generic versions. They were saying, you know what? You're getting the Cadillac of opioids.
The best of the best.
Because who's paying for it? John Q. Public.
Exactly. The report found the White House Medical Unit provided a whole bunch of healthcare and pharmaceutical services to White House staff who were not eligible. They also gave out prescription meds, including controlled substances, to ineligible White House staff.
I feel like I missed out. I should have.
As a result, they also did not bill those people who were ineligible White House staff for any of the services rendered. They also found the DOD funded and provided care for an average of 6 to 20 non-eligible patients a week.
This just tells me that. Also, I don't know if this makes sense, but the idea that, if they can just prescribe all these pills for essentially for free, because if they're not billing someone, then essentially no one's paying for it. If they're billing someone and we're paying for it, then they're billing insurance or they're billing a department. But if no one's paid for it, these are tens of thousands of dollars worth of pills, which means that pills don't need to be tens of thousands of dollars in the first place. If they can just hand them out like this, I mean.
Well, and then you have to wonder, again, because the accounting was so bad and handwritten,
Mm-hmm.
if someone's coming in for 200 oxycodone,
Yeah.
what happens to them after they leave the office?
The party. I mean,
Do a little, I don't know, a little sales on the side?
I mean, that's the thing. That sounds like intent to sell. That sounds like a crime in and of itself. And where is this? I mean, I doubt Congress is going to call any sort of hearings because it's a GOP controlled Congress on a report describing a GOP administration. So of course we're not hearing anything. Of course they're not talking about this.
But there's no reason why the media shouldn't be all over this.
Not yet.
The only NBC News is the only one I found over the weekend that has done any reporting on this.
Yeah, I mean, we'll see where it is at the beginning of the week here, but if they don't, I mean, that just begs the question why they chose not to. This is bad, but it was also, from a news point of view, salacious. It's a drug scandal. Who doesn't want to report that, regardless of
party?
Regardless of party, this is something that the press loves. It's drugs and debauchery within the White House. I mean, yeah,
and benefits that aren't deserved or earned being given out to people who aren't actually eligible for these things.
Yeah.
I'm not sure what the apparent reluctance is for the media to look more closely at this. And again, I want to point out that this began in 2018 because of complaints that were coming in about what was going on at these DC medical units. There were some whistleblowers going, this is not right. This is not copacetic. This is not a good thing.
Yeah, handing out 200 pills to one person, that's crazy. I don't. Yeah.
Now, Ronnie Jackson, in case anybody knows who that is, he was the chief medical officer under Obama and certainly under Donald Trump. He is not mentioned in this report, although he did have a reputation at one point of being the candy man.
Yeah.
Because he was so generous with just handing out drugs. But he is not mentioned in this report.
Not once?
No, not specifically. He is not specifically mentioned or targeted or anything of that.
Okay. All right.
We'll see whether or not, as you point out, Greg, will there be an investigation? Seems unlikely.
Yeah. Will there be hearings? No.
Pretty much, I would say no.
Unless something happens at election time, the end of this year, maybe they'll bring it up next year, but they're not going to. At this point, I mean, if NBC is the only one
reporting
it, and we're talking about it a little bit here, if you don't hear anything about it by Wednesday, nothing will
it's going to go away.
Yeah, because there's no win for anyone on the GOP to even talk about this unless you have some madcap loose cannon who just raises the report and didn't read it and goes, "There's drugs in this White House," and like, wrong White House. Why did you do that?
Well, this also reminds me of Madison Cawthorn, who was a representative from North Carolina.
Yeah.
And he got booted out, and he was the one who was accusing the GOP of having orgies and sex parties.
I mean, that's the thing is, that's a big old, the GOP is having orgies and sex parties. Yeah, of course they are. They all.
Wait a minute, of course they are.
Regardless of their party, you don't think those individuals party? They party. They party weird. The idea that like, oh, they're having sex party. Yeah, tell me something I don't know. I wasn't invited, but I'm sure they happen.
I guess I've just never assumed that wild sex orgies were part of being in politics, but maybe I'm just being naive.
Yep.
I'm just being naive. When we return.
I say nothing.
When we return, Joe McClear from McClear Law Offices in Oshkosh will be joining us. He works with people who are planning for the future and helping their elderly parents plan. If you are of a certain age and you want to make sure that you're going to be able to pay your bills as you get older and potentially sicker, Joe is going to have a lot of wonderful advice for you. So if you have a question for him, stick around. News is coming up next. Stay close. You're listening to Matenaer On Air. This is the Civic Media Radio Network.
Say what I don't mean. I don't know how I got this way. I'll never be alright. So I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. Tonight I'll paint it on the walls. 'Cause I'm the one at fault. I'll never fight again. And this is how it ends. I don't know what's worth fighting for, why I had to scream. But now I have some clarity to show you what I mean. I don't know how I got this way. I'll never be alright. So I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit. I'm breaking the habit tonight.
Good morning, and welcome to Matenaer On Air. Thank you so much for joining us. Jane Matenaer, Greg Mock, Calvin on the board. You can always join us. Call or text at 844-967-2789, 844-96.
Party.
Or if you're watching on a live stream, you can leave a comment as well on Facebook, YouTube, and or Twitter. He has been a guest on more than one occasion, and we're really delighted to have him back just because I think what you do, Joe, is so important. Joe McClear is joining us with McClear Law in Oshkosh. And Joe, you do planning for people as they age. Is that a short, accurate description?
Well, first of all, good morning, Jane. Good morning, Greg. First time on this show.
Ah,
True.
yes.
That's true.
Yeah.
Yes.
Very happy to be here, and that's an accurate description. Essentially, elder law would cover a number of facets for people as they age out of youth into the retirement age, prepping for long-term care and prepping for passing your estate. I mean, those are the two big pillars right there. And I'm glad we're talking about this to start off, and you're not making fun of me for the Lions collapse yesterday. So if
I wanted the Lions to win.
We all were
Yeah.
we all were cheering for the Lions.
Honestly, I don't know anybody who was rooting for anybody else except for the Lions.
Well, that's good because, the Lions have always been this team that Green Bay has just really not cared about. They hated the Vikings, you hated the Bears, but the Lions were just kind of like, oh, that's cute.
Yeah.
Good job. Go get them. I hope we become a franchise that at least annoys you people after a while.
You're a native Michiganer?
Yes, right. Yeah, Lower Michigan.
Okay. Well, again, I think there was so much goodwill behind the Lions. A lot of folks really wanted to see them take it all the way, and they deserved an accessory.
I wanted to see Kansas City and the Lions because then I'd just be excited the entire time.
For Eminem versus Taylor Swift?
Yeah, I would think that'd be fun. That'd have been super fun. But go Chiefs. But if it would have been the Lions, I would have said go Lions.
I appreciate it, folks. Thank you so much.
And now I'm all about the Chiefs just because Taylor Swift is making so many heads explode. It's hilarious. Yes. It's just hilarious. We're going to share some of the conspiracy theories about that a little bit later on in the show. But if you have a question for Joe, maybe for yourself, maybe for your parents, I highly encourage you to call while we have him here at 844-967-2789. So, Joe, my husband, I'm 64. My husband is 66. And I know we need to sit down and start some. Do we need an insurance policy? Do we need do I need to buy into some assisted living place now? Where do we start? Where should we start?
That's a very good question. I always say that insurance would be the best place to start. Now, I don't sell insurance. I don't partner with anybody who does sell insurance, but I just happen to believe in long-term care insurance enough, saying if you can find a good policy that you can afford, that should be your first option, because then you're going to be able to have freedom later in life. And there's always a risk, saying, well, people are concerned with, well, what if I put all this money into an insurance product and it is expensive, but then never need it? Okay,
Well, that's all of insurance, isn't it?
yes, it is. Yes, it is. The most expensive plan is doing nothing.
Yeah.
It really is, because if you're over 65, there's a good chance you're going to need some form of long-term care in the future. And if you don't have any plan in place, then that could take out all your life savings, take out all your real estate after just a few years. And so, yeah, engaging in, long-term care planning via insurance or talking with an elder law attorney, yeah, it's costly, but it happens to be a lot cheaper than just sitting back and hoping
Nothing
that
happens.
everything right. Yeah. It's a shame. I meet so many people whose long-term care plan is essentially this. No. If you can't see me, if you're listening on the radio, it's just me doing my old Midwestern man crossing his arm and grunting.
It was top-notch harumphing. I gotta say that was some good. Now, to piggyback on that question, I am 46. My wife turns 46 in a few weeks.
Mhm.
Is that something we should look into now versus say, like, all right, don't look at insurance until maybe you're in your 50s, or just start paying on a policy now just to get ahead of it, or the kind of planning we should be doing in our age?
Because doesn't it just get more expensive, Joe, the longer that you wait?
Generally, yes. You're never going to get cheaper insurance unless really, the landscape changes, which
Yeah.
I don't anticipate that happening. I don't see anything coming down the pike. So, yeah, I mean, I'm in my mid 40s too. Oh, 43, is that mid, or am I still
You're
early
still
40s?
early. That's your last
Nice.
year of early 40s.
Nice.
Savor it.
Okay. So there's nothing wrong with asking about it.
Yeah.
Right. There's nothing wrong with sitting down with a insurance salesman and, hey, what are our options? You can always say no. You can always say not yet. Odds are it's a lot of those options, if not all of them, are still going to be there for you in your 50s.
Mhm.
They might be slightly more expensive, but probably not that much. It's when you get to your 60s, mid 60s, that's when all of a sudden, you're seeing an uprise, and then whoosh,
Yeah.
that's way up there when it comes down to premium costs. So honestly, if you came into my office, Greg, you and your wife, and said, hey, should we be looking at long-term care insurance? And I would not say it's a necessity.
Okay.
If this was 10 years, I would say, yeah, go start looking at insurance policies. Because if you're in your mid 50s, that's when you stop gambling with your age so much if you want to get a policy. But with you, it's an option. Go ahead. I know people your age who have insurance policies. Very few.
Yeah.
But as I say, you got options in front of you, Greg.
Okay.
If you're just joining us, Joe McClear is our guest from McClear Law in Oshkosh. He has joined the show before. The show was a different form at that time, but he is back on Civic Media. And you can ask questions if you like, 844-967-2789. Leave a comment on the live stream as well on Facebook, YouTube, Twitter. Joe, you did point out that these are expensive policies if you're trying to set up for help with assisted living or something like that. What are we talking about for premiums? I know every policy is going to be different, but can you give me some ballpark?
Well, it's really difficult. It depends on the type of policy you're looking at. So there's traditional long-term care insurance, which works just like, say, health insurance. You keep paying into it. If you need help, they're going to help you. If you don't need help, you don't get your money back. That's your traditional policies.
Mhm.
So depending on your age and your health, we're talking annual premiums probably. I could be way off, but just from what I'm experiencing with my clients, between $3,000 and $4,000 a year. So, I mean, but that's, that will increase
Sure.
as you age,
Sure.
for sure. There are other types of policies, single premium cash policies, essentially, where if you have a bunch of money sitting in a savings account or in a bunch of CDs that aren't really generating much for you, you can put these into an asset-based policy, and it's usually at least $50,000 at one time. But you put it into the policy. They check your health. They say, okay, well, if you need long-term care, we're going to give you 2 times the coverage or 3 times the coverage or more. If you don't need it, the premium will come back to you. The premium will come back to your family. You're basically giving up any chance of getting interest off of it, but you're not throwing money down a well like you would with your traditional policies. So more expensive, but without necessarily, you're getting something out. You're not throwing everything away. Similar would be the third type would be a life insurance policy with a long-term care rider. Sometimes they're called hybrid policies. Those are pretty expensive, and I really shouldn't stab at a guess in terms of what the premiums would be, but essentially it works just like life insurance. You pay into it. When you pass on, your family gets a death benefit. If you need long-term care, though, you'll have a coverage for long-term care that would exceed your death benefit. So you're kind of getting the best of the both worlds there. I hear those aren't the easiest policies to grab onto, and they are expensive for sure, probably the most expensive from the insurance realm, that is. So you can there's a range. That's all I could say.
Well, and I think it's interesting. I had never heard of, again, if you have $50,000, if you have a chunk of money that you can take out of your savings, and that seems like a reasonable option for people who have the wherewithal to do it.
Yeah.
Because again, at least you're going to get something back.
Oh, without a doubt. I think traditional policies, people, even though it's the nature of the game of insurance generally, don't like the idea of sinking all this money in every year and then think, well, what if I get hit by a bus or I die peacefully in my sleep? And all of a sudden, all that money that I spent for nothing. Okay, fine. Well, there's these alternatives saying, well, you're putting this money in. If you don't need it, it's going to come back to your family.
Yeah, that's and what is that called, Joe? That specific type of insurance policy, assets?
Well, I call it asset-based, single premium asset-based policies.
Okay.
I'm sure each insurance carrier will have its own unique name for it.
I'm writing this down.
Yeah, you are. I mean, and that's the thing is like, that's another question I have, because I know my mother has long-term care insurance, because we had a conversation with her once, because when we bought her home, we're like, you come live with us when the time comes, and she just goes, I am never living with you.
I don't want to live with you.
I'm like, ouch, and okay. But she has long-term care insurance, and so when the time comes, we'll be able to, if we need it, we'll utilize it. I mean, to me, it makes sense, Joe. And honestly, I get where people come from with regard to insurance, saying, arms crossed, harumping, going, why am I going to waste money on that if I don't have to use it? Well, that's fine. You're taking that gamble, and that's on you. But at the end of the day, if you have loved ones and you then require care and they can't give it to you, they're paying for it. Like it's.
Yeah.
Well, and Joe, I think you pointed this out when we first started talking too. If you don't have a plan and you don't have some insurance and you have to go into assisted living or a nursing home or something like that, they're going to take everything you have.
Yeah.
Pretty much.
It's not like they're going to just forgive it and say, "Oh, Fred was a great guy. We know he didn't have insurance, so we'll treat him differently." That's not how it works.
That's not how it works. I mean, there goes the house that you'd lived in for decades. Perhaps you built it yourself.
Yeah.
Or the family cabin, or the hunting land, or the second property, or for farmers. Oh my goodness, that could be really devastating. I mean, family farms they've been in a tight pinch for quite a while for a number of reasons.
Yeah. But
when it comes down to long-term care, that could really, really hinder ability to keep it in the family. I used to work with farmers a lot more. And you talk to folks, say, this farm's been in our family since the turn of last century. Wow. Wouldn't that be great if we keep it going? Mm-hmm. But there are issues that will jump up, not just when it comes down to the costs of having the farm, but when it comes down to your own health.
That's really frightening.
Yeah.
It is. It's frightening. And I know this is a hard thing to talk about. Nobody wants to admit mortality. Nobody wants to face that. Nobody wants to It's coming for all of us, but it is.
Mhm.
I mean, honestly, like I always think to myself, like it's never been something personally I've had a problem discussing when there's been a lot of loss in my life. So I know that happens. I know that's something we deal with. So I would much rather sit down and be as informed as possible because I'm not thinking about my mom dying. I'm thinking about her life and how she's going to spend the rest of it, hopefully being cared for and being happy.
Without a doubt.
That makes me happy, but also they just got to peel the Band-Aid off and go for it. And
If you have any questions for Joe, feel free to join us. You can call or text at 844-967-2789, 844-967-2789. Leave a comment on the live stream on Facebook, YouTube, and Twitter. Stay close. Joe will be here when we return. This is Matenaer On Air, coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network. Good morning. Welcome to Matenaer On Air. Jane Matenaer, Greg Bach, the board lord on the board. Calvin, coming
I
to you
saw
live.
Board Lord Slider C from Andrew from Maine. I like Board Lord
Slider C.
Slider C. It's
Getting more complicated as
Sounds like
time goes on.
sounds like a burger.
We're working on a nickname for Calvin, our producer, Joe. If you want to ask Joe a question, 844-967-2789. Leave a comment on the live stream. We're talking about Joe McClear Law in Oshkosh, Wisconsin, and he helps people plan for the tragically the inevitable sometimes.
Or pre-plan
Or
just to be
pre-plan, just
prepared.
to be prepared so your family doesn't lose everything if it ends up that you have to go into assisted living or long-term care or anything like that.
Yeah.
You said we have a comment on the live stream.
Yeah, Papa Rico asked a question for Joe. Can I put my assets in my children's name ahead of time or some kind of trust?
Those are two different things. So putting your assets into your children's names probably is not a great idea. There's a number of big issues with that. Tax related, there's a lot of issues. And you're giving up control over your assets and giving the liability to them, essentially. So if you were to put your house in your son's name and then your son gets divorced, okay, problems there, okay?
Yes.
Or God forbid your son predeceases you, and then it goes to his wife, who you may or may not have a good relationship with, and then the wife gets remarried. Who's going to own your house? Are you going to still be able to live there? Putting them into a trust, that when insurance is no longer on the table, that's where I come in. Essentially, there are hundreds of different types of trusts. A very specific type of trust can be used to house assets like real estate, insurance, life insurance policies, stock, that would protect them from having to spend them down on your long-term care and keep them for your family after you're gone. You can still live in your house. You can still use it as you want. You'd preserve the death benefit on your life insurance policies for your family afterwards. And if you go into a nursing home for half a year or 10 years it's still going to make it down to your family. So the reason I always say, though, that insurance is the first option is because those types of trusts, they're great, but they're irrevocable. So you are giving up some control without a doubt. If you want to change your mind, if you want to say move, you still can. It's just you're adding some hassle to it.
Yeah.
So I say insurance first. And then if you need to supplement that, or you can't find a policy that you like, then I'll work with you to utilize a type of trust. But putting assets right into your kids' names, 99 times out of 100, I'm going to say bad idea.
Okay.
Yeah, and I know people like to think that the relationships are going to stay the same and everything is going to be fine. Money changes people, and not necessarily in a good way.
People just change too. I mean,
that's true too. But I think sometimes when there's a whole bunch of assets involved,
yeah,
people start looking at that differently, and you hate to see that kind of trust in those relationships be broken over something like that. You do.
Yeah. When my parents kick the bucket, I'm going to be a thousandaire. What can I say?
A multi-thousandaire.
Yeah. Now, before I asked you about long-term insurance, but another question I have is I'm relating it directly to my wife and myself. We are still in our mid-40s. What sort of pre-planning, if any, should we be doing at this point? You know, we have a home, we're paying, we have a mortgage, and we're not going to have any children. But as far as just protecting ourselves for if something happens, you know, going younger than expected, is there anything we should be doing to protect ourselves?
Well, when it comes down to protecting each other, first, if you co-own your home, if you have both your names on your accounts,
yeah,
then at least probably the survivor review is going to be okay right off the bat.
Yeah.
That's not saying you shouldn't do anything else, because if something were to happen to the two of you, God forbid, it could be a hassle of figuring out, well, who actually died first? Because if you don't have a plan in place, then the laws under the state of Wisconsin would say it goes to the deceased family.
Yeah.
Okay. If your spouse is gone and you don't have any children, then you're looking at parents.
Yeah.
You're looking over at siblings.
Mm-hmm.
But whose parents and whose siblings?
Yeah.
Okay. And maybe that's not how you want things to. Maybe you want to keep it in the family, but maybe you want to give some assets to friends or charities.
Mm-hmm.
Then you can do that. But you're at the point right now, I think, you've reached two milestones. You got married and you bought a house.
Yeah.
Now you got to start thinking about your plan, because if you're unmarried, you don't have a house. Well, oh well.
Yeah.
but you're at a point where if you both passed, then your families are going to have to figure out, all right, who's taking care of these estates? From which estate is all the assets going to be, given from? And there's going to be a lot of hassle. And so you can just set it out in advance,
Mm-hmm.
say in a will or what have you, saying, all right, if this were to happen, here's the plan. And assuming you did it while you were sober and in front of two uninterested witnesses, then that's what's going to happen.
Oh, those are easy to find in my case. No one's interested.
It's just
I noticed you didn't comment on the sober part.
Oh, I'm drunk right now. It's fine.
Yeah,
no one cares.
And again, Joe, this is just to reinforce the message, I think, too, of how important it is to write things down.
Yeah.
And you can tell everyone your plans. You can tell them what you want. Telling them is great. That's wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
You still have to have it written down for it to hold up, right? To protect you and your wishes.
Yeah, some people ask me about a video will sometimes. I see that in movies. That doesn't exist. That doesn't exist. No, you have to write it down. And it's not just scratching it on a piece of paper and saying, here's where I want everything to go.
Yeah.
There's formality to it. So what's the best way to make sure you're doing it right? Talk to a lawyer.
Yep.
All right. We're not all bad. Really. We're not all bad.
You're not all bad, and you're not all insanely expensive either. It really depends upon what you need.
99% of lawyers give the rest of us a bad name.
I see what you did there, Joe McClear, with ending the segment with a joke.
Joe Joe McClear is a friend of the show and a lawyer in Oshkosh, McClear Law in Oshkosh. Thank you so very much for joining us, Joe. I think it's just critically important what you do and that people are informed so we can all protect ourselves going forward. Have a wonderful day.
Lions 2025.
Stay close.
Woo!
News is coming up next. And then we're going to be talking to Marilla Copier. This is Matenaer On Air coming to you across the Civic Media Radio Network.
Are you gathering up the keys?